Hello there. We're going to talk about building a REST service using Visual Studio 2015. We'll talk a little bit about what REST is. We'll introduce you to the tools that we're going to use, and then we'll get right into it, writing some code in Visual Studio. So why REST? Well, REST stands for Representational State Transfer. What that is a way for us to access functionality over the World Wide Web. We use get, post, put, delete to access these resources. Now, the best example of REST is the web itself. When you request a page from a web server, that is REST. We use XML or JSON to transport data between the client and server. It is a standard, so it's language agnostic. That means that I can develop a service in Java and access it in .NET. The tools that you're going to see in this demo are Visual Studio 2015 Enterprise. However, the Community Edition works and it's free. Also, we're going to use the Chrome web browser as our client with the DHC REST client browser extension. And so I'm going to bring up Chrome real quick and show you how to install that extension if you've never done this before. Under Settings, click on Extensions. You can browse to the web apps, the Chrome App Store. If you'll type DHC, now DHC is one of many clients that are developer tools that can be used as a REST client. So if you just click Add to Chrome, answer the questions to add the app, you'll notice it'll download down here in the bottom. It's adding it, checking here, so just be patient, let it get through. And now it's under the Apps button, you'll see DHC. So we'll go ahead and launch that, and you'll see what it is. This is going to allow me to actually issue things like a GET request against a specific URI. So we'll use this in just a moment. So jumping back over to our slides. Basically what happens, as you know, with the web is that the client browser initiates a request. That goes to the server where it's processed. The server then sends back a response of some type. This is how all pages on the web work, and this is how REST works as well. Here's some of the things that we can do. We can ask for a resource. Now, resource, you can think of a resource as like an object or a page, a set of data, but probably the best representation from an object-oriented programming standpoint is to think of it as an object that has data in it. So get will get that resource. Post will create a new resource. If we're creating new ones, put will update or replace a resource, and delete will delete an existing resource. Here's some of the response codes that may come back, and there's different series of codes here, and I'm not going to go through them in detail. The ones that here's some common ones over here, but the server may send back a 200 saying it's okay, or a 500 internal server error, 404, it couldn't find the resource that you're asking for, things like that. So we're going to build the server. We're not going to program a client, but we'll test it using the browser, which is a big advantage of REST. I don't have to go and build a client program in order to test this. I can test it right in the browser. So that's the end of our slides. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. So what we will do is in Visual Studio, select File, New, Project. Under Visual C#, which I'm going to do this in coding in C#, select Web, and I'm going to call this a simple REST server. And it's going to store in this particular location. I'll hit OK. And it's going to come back and ask me what of these I want. Let's start with empty, but make sure that you check Web API. This is going to add some important tools for us to use. You'll also notice I'm not hosting in Azure. I'm doing this all locally. So now it's going to take a few moments and create the server for us. Visual Studio will build a lot for you. That's the advantage of using it. It can really help you so that you don't have to hand code everything. So over here we see some different folders. We'll get into some details on what some of these might be in subsequent presentations, but for today, we're going to mainly focus on controllers. And you'll notice the controllers folder is empty. So I'm going to right click on this and select add. And I'm going to select add controller. And I want this to be a web API 2 controller with read-write actions. So if you'll select that, and we'll call this a person controller. So let's say that our resource, it represents a person. So you'll notice what it did is it built the code for us. And so these are methods. You can think of them as methods that you can call to get things. So here, maybe this is person 1. It defaults to person 1 and value 1 and value 2, but you can do person 1 and person 2. And we'll return some person. And then you'll also notice there's post, put, etc. What you'll also notice is it tells you how to call this. Okay. Now the way that happens is through some special mapping code that is in your configuration files, which we won't go into detail on right now, but that's how you can control how these are called. Now if I run this as is, let's see what happens. So this will start up our web server running in the internal version of IIS that's part of Visual Studio. And it runs under, in this case, localhost 19885 is the port. So I am going to copy this over to my browser here. And so that's my URI. Let's try that again. Something else in the buffer here. All right, so we're going to just send in localhost 198.198.85. That's just happens to be what's running. If I jump back over to Visual Studio, I can say, well, if I wanted to get all the people, I could do this. And I can do a get, and I'll do send. So now it's sending the request over, and you'll notice it came back, and the response down here is person 1 and person 2. So I went out to the web. Actually, it's running all locally on my machine, right? But it went to the server, made the request. The response coming back is a 200 or OK, saying, yes, I was successful. And then it came back and brought me back the data that was specified right here. So it actually executed this code. Now, what happens if I say person/2? Now that should go get the person with ID 2, and it comes back and just says some person. Now the reason it just said some person is because it doesn't matter what I call the get with passing in an ID with, it always just returns some person. So the next thing we'll be doing in the next presentation is building all this code out to where it actually returns items the way one would expect. So that's a very, very brief introduction to REST using Visual Studio. You can see how quick it was to get started, and hopefully you can try that out and see what happens. You'll also notice if you misspell something and then do a get, you'll get a 404 not found. It says I can't find that resource. So REST is a very powerful way of building up a set of functionality that comes off of web servers, and it's really, again, the way that the internet works. So I'd recommend that you go out and try it out and see if you can get this much working, and then in subsequent presentations we'll go into more detail on REST. Thanks.